department or sewer problem, those calls come into our control room and we call out the appropriate department. Traffic signal maintenance. We maintain traffic signals and for the city. We also have our SVP Meter Connect Wi-Fi, so there's Wi-Fi service, throughout the city, outdoors. And then we also have a dark fiber system. It started out connecting our facilities. We put in excess fibers, but we got a very big enterprise, actually pretty good enterprise, leasing dark fiber to mostly commercial customers here. So where does the energy that we sell come from? And there's the chart up on the side over there if you want to look closer. We also have some handouts that show where these projects are, and on the back gives you a little bit more information in the handout on what these are. But we have a very diverse set of resources for the city. And it's diverse by fuel type, it's diverse by geographic location. You can see some coal over there in New Mexico, which we're going to divest ourselves of at the end of next year. Everything's put in place and we'll be out of the coal plant. But we also have wind up in Washington, wind power there. So it's a diverse set of resources geographically. By fuel type, there's solar, there's wind, geothermal, landfill gas, natural gas, hydro, it's all part of our resources there. And it's also diverse by ownership. We own some of the power plants, some of them that we've joined with other municipalities into joint powers agencies and could build larger plants where it would be too much risk for any single one of us to build. And then we have power purchase contracts where we actually buy from third parties. So, this is just a graphic of where some of the fuel types are. I mean, actually 46% of our energy does come right now from natural gas, and there's about 9% from coal. I noticed that caption disappeared there, but that gray part is actually coal. We have hydroelectric power. Right now in 2015 is about 17%. In a normal year it'd be closer to 22%. Again, landfill gas, solar, geothermal, and wind. Yes?
I'm curious what's going to replace the coal, you said in about a year.
Yeah, right. We actually, there's a couple of things. Primarily, we did, through a joint action agency, participate in the Lodi Energy Center, which is the most efficient combined cycle gas-fired power plant in California, just recently built. So we have about 70 megawatt share of that, about 50 megawatts of coal. Now, so there's the backstop replacement. But we're actually active in the market 24 hours a day. So a lot of times that plant doesn't run because market will buy on the market. And as we build up renewables, it may be renewables, it may be unspecified market purchases. So, but that's the ultimate backstop. We're also constantly looking. Renewables is probably our number one approach for new resources. So, one thing that makes us very unique is our customer mix here. And you see the pie chart there. Almost 90% of our sales of energy go to industrial customers. About 7% of it goes to residential. And the last 3 is commercial and municipal in there. And that's directly opposite to the numbers of customers. Close to 90% of our customers are residential. Now this sets us aside and makes us different from most utilities, because many utilities, that's much more balanced. You almost see a third, there between industrial, commercial, and residential. So we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that too, because of the impacts.
John,
our rates.
it looks like the residential label dropped out for some reason.
There are a number of labels that are dropping out right now. The green is the residential. That's 7%, 7.2, I believe. That's interesting that those are dropping. So going to the budget and looking at that $385 million budget, almost 63% of it goes to the resource and production costs. That buys the gas for the gas-fired plants, it buys the purchases, whether it be your renewable and hydro, geothermal purchases, all of that goes into that, is in that $241 million there. You also see, debt service a little less than 5%. Contribution in lieu and interfund services, the services we get from the general fund, is just under 8%, of our budget. About the same as our capital improvements, and it takes about $10 million a year, about a third of that, just in keeping the system infrastructure up, just to keep the distribution system in place, adding customer connections, but just the normal day-to-day stuff. The other $20 million tends to be projects that either we're replacing a larger item like a substation, or we're building something to connect a new customer, and I'll talk about that a little bit more too. Salaries and benefits, just a little over 9%. And materials, supplies, and services, this is contractual services. All of our other supplies is about 7.2% of our budget. So let's talk about new load. And one of the questions always comes up is all that development is that the reason our rates have to go up, and what is the impact on our rates? Very common question there. Well, the answer is it's not the cause for the rate increase, or it doesn't have an upward pressure on our rates. And the reason for that is the way our system is set up, and our fees and our development fees, is that those new developments pay through fees or actual construction of the capital improvements necessary to serve them. So if somebody comes in and a large data center, yes.
What about the increased demand though? When you introduce that type of a block of new residents, doesn't that put some strain on the system for what our supply and demand is?
Let's talk a little bit more about that.
That's a common question I get asked
Right.
in my job.
Yeah. No, let's continue. Let's kind of walk through this. So the upfront costs, the capital costs to put these in place are paid for by the developers as we go forward. Now, the way our system is developed over the years, we have we have a fair amount of demand and capacity in our resource mix and in our system. So we are not anywhere close to those maximum numbers. We're well within the capabilities, both on our demand for resources for power, and within on the higher level. The lower portions where we may not be able to serve that size of a development in a particular part of town, as an example, we have some data centers that want to go in and expand off of Lafayette, De La Cruz, area. We're going to have to increase our local transmission, our 60 kV transmission in that area. Those developers will have to pay more because we're going to have to expand those parts, so they're actually paying for that. Now, because we have that capacity, when we bring the load on, in our normal rates, they pay the capacity charge in their rates and an energy charge. Those charges pay a lot more than the variable costs that we incur to serve and procure that extra energy and that demand. And they actually contribute to the fixed costs and actually lowers that fixed cost burden across all of our customers. So as we bring these people on, it actually has a downward pressure on the rates. So the rates are less than they would have been without that additional load. Yes?
Is there a tiered rate structure where they're paying different rates per kilowatt hour than the standard residents who really lived here and supported the utility for their adult lives?
I have actually some slides, but they're right at the end. But the bottom line is, these industrial customers, you pay just about the same, roughly as our residential customers. There is no other utility that I'm aware of that has that same, mix. It costs a lot more to serve a residential customer just because we've got lots more lines down the backyards, a lot more devices to get every, drop to every, home and so on, there. It actually, if you just looked at pure cost of service, but we're able to, because of that high concentration of industrial customers there, we're actually able to keep our residential rates. And so keep that in mind. I'll come back and I'll actually show you some slides on those economics and those numbers. And if we have further, we'll go into that deeper, at that time. So again, the low growth development and so on is not creating an upward pressure, on our rates. So the question is, what is? What is out there? And this is, I just threw a lot of stuff on this graph, but the black line is what our operating costs are. That's the line. Now, rates are always, kind of our last resort for how you're balancing this. And that dotted line is the rate increases, percent rate increases over time, so going up. Now, the other red line, the solid red line, is reserves. So we're always trading off the use of reserves to try to gradual and keep the rate, any rate adjustments in a, as gradual as possible and minimize any rate adjustments. But that's not the only thing we're doing. We have a lot of upward pressures. I mean, if you go back to 2005, we had some Western Area Power Administration contracts that went away. It was almost a $50 million swing in our finances back then, which was a big percentage there. We actually ended up with 2 5% rate increases, 5% each 6 months. So we had a 10% rate increase in that year in 2006 there. So you got a bump. But we also started pulling out of reserves, to make up, the difference. We then, had some natural gas prices, ran up from $3 or $4. They ran up to $10, $11 in 2008. They were running up. We ended up in the first drought. I characterize it as the first drought and the second drought. We had 3 years of drought sitting in there. We also had some wholesale market changes that occurred. In 2005, we were getting almost $200 million in revenue from wholesale sales in the wholesale market. Today, we're around $20 million in the wholesale market, just because of the way the market's changed and our access, to markets and so on. Electrical transmission rates, we'll end up talking about that one again. We had one good year in 2010 and 11 of water, and then we hit another 5-year drought period, there. So that impacted, those costs. And then just recently, the natural gas transmission costs, what we pay to bring natural gas into, power plants, just had a tremendous, and we'll talk about that one a little bit more. So what we do is we try to drive again, balance the rate increases with the reserves. And as you can see, we drew down the reserves, quite a bit. We actually got below where our target levels were, and we'll talk about the importance of that with rating agencies a little bit. And, we even drew it down a little bit more, again, trying to balance out, the rate increases and the reserves. Now we got to kind of build those back up because we're starting to get, see some impacts with the rating agencies and so on. So the one thing I wanted to point out is we just don't sit back and try to balance this with reserves and rates. We're actively trying to work the cost, side of this. If we can reduce our costs, that's what we do first. 24 hours a day, we have a team that's scheduling power, and we're always trying to get the least cost, way to bring the power in. We have the power plants. We talk about the Lodi Energy Center kind of replacing the coal. But like I said, we don't run that plant if we can buy power cheaper, somewhere else. And that's a decision we're making every hour, of the day as we go through, day ahead in real time. We're trying to balance So if you go back to 2005, I mean, we built a power plant in Santa Clara, the Don von Racefield power plant, and it came online in 2005, and that kind of made up for that loss of Western Energy, but it cost more to operate, so there was a cost, increase there. Natural gas prices run up, so what happens when you're in a run up on natural gas prices? You try to buy out a little bit longer, you buy a year's worth rather than buying on a monthly basis, or daily or an hourly basis. So you hedge those natural gas prices and try to get some stability into your rate. We did that. We also entered into, in 2009, a gas prepay where there's a strange transaction, but we bought like 35 years worth of gas, but we pay the index price for that gas minus 76 cents. So we get a 76-cent discount on every quantity of gas we buy. I'll actually, and when that, and an MMBTU, million BTU, costs about $3 right now in the market. So we get a 76-cent discount. That's a pretty hefty discount, 25% discount. Gas runs up to $10, you're still getting the 76-cent discount off of it. So it's a lower percentage, but we're still getting the same discount. But we entered into that transaction. We've reached finance debt. As interest rates went down, you refinance your debt just like you refinance your mortgages, and you're driving your costs down there. Gas prices came down, so that was good downward pressure, for us. And actually, part of that dip in the cost structure also was loss of load during the recession. We lost about 3% of our load. We actually have a very stable resource, and that's really not much. Most utilities lost a whole lot more than that, but we have a very stable base there. Now that loss of load is just the opposite of adding load. So that has an upward pressure on the rates because we're not spreading those fixed costs over that additional sales. We got rid of some transmission lines that were no longer useful in the market. Part of what we could leverage in the wholesale market with wholesale market changes. So we divested those to other partners, or we sold so we got rid of some of those non-productive assets. We added a phase shifting transformer. I'll talk about that a little bit. And then we got back into a load growth scenario, so that helped there. And then we're constantly working in the legislative and regulatory area. So some of these transmission price increases, actual gas price increases, we are actually actively involved with the regulators that are setting those prices and trying to minimize the impact. So the point here is that we're actively working the cost side of this, trying to minimize our operating costs so we can minimize the rate impact on our owners, our customers here. And so we got here, just dive a little deeper into the transmission costs. And this is the cost that we pay to bring energy from those generation all over the western United States to the city, Santa Clara, so then we can distribute it to our customers. Now, in 2001, this goes back to 2001, but we're paying the equivalent for each customer about 0.3 of a cent per kilowatt hour. And our rates were probably 7 cents, 7.5 cents a kilowatt hour back then. So that was about 3%, of 3 or 4% of our of your rate is in that. Those have just steadily gone up, over time. A lot of it's transmission in Southern California that brings renewables to markets in Southern California. But the way transmission works in California, it's socialized, spread across all customers. Whether you're using it or not, the total amount of transmission gets spread and charged. So we've done, a number of things. And then I guess look, just this last year, probably the biggest thing on this graph is going in 2016 in the current fiscal year. It went from 1.5 cents to 2 cents. Well, right now, our residential rates in 11-cent range, 11 and a little bit range. 2 cents of that is now, almost 17-18% of that is transmission costs. So that's a real driver. Just the uplift in 2016 alone, about $10 million. That's equivalent of about 2.5%, pressure on our rates. But again, we try to work these problems, try to find, solutions for it. We made an investment a few years ago because of those climbing rates in a phase shifting transformer. And one thing that we did before 2005, on that chart, I didn't have it on there, but we actually built a higher voltage transmission line to tie to PG&E. Well, this phase shifting transformer, by investing in this, we actually pay less transmission, a lower transmission charge for that high voltage line than we do for the rest of our interconnections. This phase shifting transformer pushes it so more energy comes over the cheaper line. And that's the whole purpose of this. It shifts it from the more expensive interconnections to the less expensive interconnections. So that could save, $5-6 million a year. Came online in April of this year. We're still optimizing it. We have to work with PG&E and the California Independent System Operator that operates the transmission system to kind of refine and maximize the return. But there's an example of a project or an investment we made that, again, try to minimize those operating costs and the impacts, on our customers. So another one impact that just came on in August 1st of this year. I mean, these are just real recent, costs put on us. They increased the natural gas transmission rate. Now, this is the rate we pay to deliver that $3 an MMBTU gas to our power plant. It went up 74 cents. So again, almost a 25% increase in the cost of fuel if you include that transportation, component on there. So, we've been burning 8 million BTU a year, $3, it's about $24 million. Well, that transportation rate went up $6 million. And again, about 25% increase there, cost gas. And that's about equivalent to about a 1.5%, cost impact if you put it in your rates, there, everything else being equal. Now that one, we were extremely active at PUC. We entered a coalition with a number of other municipal utilities that had generation and others, and to oppose the rate increase. It actually has, this one has another effect, is that they lowered the cost for people, generation units that actually tie to the full backbone. We're on what they call local transmission. They raised our rates and lowered the rates there. Because of that difference in cost, it is now changing the dispatch of generation in California, and less efficient units are actually being run. It's actually increasing natural gas, greenhouse gases in California, and has just a really bizarre effect. So this is, and I'm sure the CPUC didn't think about that. So we're looking at, again, working with the coalition, trying to bring that to the legislature's attention, trying to bring it to CPUC's attention, that there's these unintended consequences by making these two transportation costs so desperate. So just an idea of some of the things that we're working on, and trying to do. So, what is important? Why is it important to keep reserves? Because we had that $120 million, target there. And I think it's really important to kind of understand. One of the issues is we work with bond rating agencies who rate our bonds. And we have an A+ bond rating, which is actually, it's a good bond rating. Fitch and S&P both have us at A+. We now, but they look at a couple of different things. Their number one thing is, are we setting the rates so that it's tracking our costs? That's what they care about the most. Second thing they look at, do you have the cash reserves to absorb, a deviation from the norm? If you had a market change that can come hit you, that you can ride out a temporary, cost change until you can adjust rates, to come up, and get through the change. So that's the importance of those reserves. Now, our customers tell us that they like to see predictable rates. You want low, gradual changes. We don't want to come out and surprise you and come out with a 15% rate increase, use all our reserves down, and then just come out with a rate increase. So that's why we tend to try to balance the use of those reserves and the rate increases there. So, that has caused our reserves to go down. And S&P actually this summer, I think they partially didn't understand our full financials, but they did take us. They left us at A+, but they did take us from a stable to a negative outlook. That just means they're looking at us closer now as we come through the next year in that bond rating. And that just reinforces that thought that we need to get those reserve levels up, and we need to make sure that our financial ratios, are properly. We had a discussion this morning with our financial advisor and went through, kind of put together some thoughts of how we're going to approach both these rating agencies and get that negative outlook taken off. Because I think our plan as we go forward, and we do plan, we have models that go out 10 years, and we look out, the earlier years, 3 to 5 years, are more accurate than further out. But we do look at our rates, over a period of time, and try to figure out how can we do it in a gradual basis. So, didn't do the 3 this year, I have to come back and do an 8 next year or whatever. That's the type of thing that we're trying, to avoid as we look through, put together these plans. So really, to kind of summarize it down and really start talking about, the two big cost drivers that caught us this year were those transportation costs for electricity and transmission costs, and the transportation and natural gas. There's a $16 million uplift, with those. We also always have capital projects. The drought may continue, it may not continue. Just don't know at this point in time of the year. Last year was an average year. The year before that was really bad. So, we're still, the reservoirs are recovering and so on. So that can go either way on that. Renewable resources, one thing that wasn't in those charts is, the whole, and we're fully bought into this, the whole idea of increasing our renewable portfolios, greening our mix. That's one thing that getting rid of the coal plant does. It gets rid of at least 25% of our greenhouse emissions in our mix, getting rid of that 9% piece of coal. That's how much greenhouse gases coal does. And that's replacing it with natural gas, assuming that we can't get it the renewable replacement. Getting the rate stabilization fund back up from the 85 million where it is today to 120 million for that. Another contributing thing that I didn't throw on here is interest income. When interest rates, again, if I go back to 2005, I was making $17 or $18 million a year. You were making $17 or $18 million a year on interest on cash utility pass. Now you're making between $1.5 and $2 million a year because interest rates, are way down. So again, that was and these are actually impacts that hit us every year. Interest rates come back up, that'll help us out, So what are we proposing? We're proposing to City Council on December 6th. We're going to propose a 3% rate increase. That'll generate in a full year about $12 million. And if we do 3% this year, in full disclosure, 3% next year, actually, hopefully things can flatten out. We should bring in the 120 back up to the $120 million by 2020 or before. We're not trying to do it, all at once. Again, we're trying to minimize the impacts, on our customers as we go through this. And we're going to continue to do all the other cost reduction efforts. And some of those efforts are making up the difference between that $16 million uplift and the $12 million we get from this rate increase and the rate increase next year. So what does that do to the customers? How's the impact? This is where the rubber hits the road. How does this hit us? Now, for the average customer in the center of the top chart there, it's about $50 a month, your bill. And for a 3% increase, it's going to be about $1.50. So that's going to be our average, customer. Now, if you live, in a smaller unit, and you use minimal electric heat, or whatever, you could be down in that lower range where maybe you're paying $34 or $5 a month, and you're going to see a $1, increase, with this. If you have electric heat in an apartment and higher energy usage, or you have a house, maybe a swimming pool and swimming pool pump, maybe a refrigerator in your garage or whatever, you could be in that 1,000 kilowatt hour a month, or more, and then you're going to see you'll see $3.50 a month increase. So it varies there. Now you look at our commercial customers. Our commercial customers are kind of a very broad group. I include the industrial customers in this. Small business that uses 1,000 kilowatt hours. Our commercial rates are slightly higher than our residential rates. So they pay about $175 a month, and I'd see about a $5.28 increase in this. A larger business, 500 kilowatt hours a month, paying a bill of $66,000 is going to see closer to $2,000 increase. Even bigger, 132,000 a month, is going to see close to 4,000 increase. Now we have $1 million a month customers. They're going to see a $30,000 increase a month there. So everybody's getting that increase, and they're paying, it's a 3% across the board. So now we do have rate assistance programs, for people who have trouble, meeting paying their electric bills. And it's based on 80% of the median county income. You can qualify. We'll give a 25% discount on that. Also have a medical rate assistance program. So if you have devices in your home that are running 24 hours a day, a breathing machine, oxygen, whatever it is that use electricity, we will give you again a 25% discount on that. And then there are other rate assistance programs that if you're really having trouble making ends meet, we can refer you to and work with you to get you in those programs. I do want to say we have full line of residential programs from energy home audit, home energy audits. One of our energy specialists will come out and go through your home and give you advice on how you can save energy and the use of home. It's free. We'd love to come out and talk to you. We have a full set of rebates for energy efficient appliances and so on. So we encourage people to do that. PV system, we have rebates there, and then we have a lot of energy programs and information available for you. We also have a green power program. People interested in 100% green power, they can talk to us about our Santa Clara Green Power program, which is actually an award-winning program.
You betcha.
So now let's talk about value to the customers. I put this slide up that compares us to PG&E. It's just not intended in any way to justify a rate increase. It's just not the way we work. But it does represent the value to our residential customers and our customers as a whole that you get by owning your own electric utility and having the utility in Santa Clara. Our rates are 46% below PG&E rates for residential customers, and then go down to 20% below for our industrial customers there. So what does that mean? That means, as I think I mentioned before, that keeps $100 million in Santa Clara having those lower rates. It keeps it in the pockets of our customers. Almost 25 million of that 100 even though it's 7% of our sales. Almost 25 million of that goes to into the pockets of our residential customer. Typical residential customer, you're saving $500 a year, by being in Santa Clara. So again, that doesn't justify rate increases at all, but it is, I think, an example of the value that the municipal utility brings to you as a customer in Santa Clara. So I put this slide up just again to show, I think this is an example, and I'm going to compliment this group of people in the room that I went through, because many of them are staff members here. But because we're working those costs, all of these utilities, whether they're municipally owned in the bottom half of that, or whether they're investor owned in the top, are seeing the same cost pressures that we are, that I went through there. They're all seeing the same upward cost pressures. But, I think our team here is managing those cost pressures, well, and we are, you gotta look at utilities, over 9,000 customers, on full disclosure, we're the lowest, average system cost of any of those. There's a couple of municipal utilities that are just starting out that have fewer customers, and they only serve new, developments and so on. They actually have a little bit lower costs, than us. But anybody, again, that 9,000 or more, we're at the bottom of the list. Again, that does not justify raising your rates at all. What that does do, though, I believe, it shows you the value that you get from the team here that I'm really proud, to work with there. So, with that, that's my presentation. I'm happy to talk to you, go into more detail, and answer any questions that you have. Yeah.
I'm curious. It seems like the majority of what your organization is responsible for is delivering power,
Mm-hmm.
and that probably takes up the majority of your attention, as it should. But you also mentioned sort of secondary services that you guys provide to the residents, which may have sort of a disproportionate mind share among the residents. Things like traffic signals,
Mm-hmm.
maybe just a tiny fraction of your business, but probably have a much larger impact on the quality of people's lives around here than their power bill,
Yeah.
quite frankly. So I'm curious, how do you go about collecting public preferences about these sort of secondary services, assuming that there's some flexibility in how you could be providing those services?
Yeah, that's a good question. Traffic signals, we actually perform the service for our Public Works Department and our traffic, group within the Public Works Department. So we provide, since we have the technicians and the electricians and technicians, we actually provide those services. And in that one, the general fund actually reimburses us for it. To give you an idea, it's probably $700,000 or $800,000 out of that $385 million. But you're right. But that's a very good point. I mean, we do customer surveys and so on. We do residential 1 year. We do commercial in the alternate years. We're mainly looking at customer satisfaction on our primary services there. We also try to look at some ancillary services that are that we can provide. But that is an area that we probably don't dive as deep into some of those other things as we do in that process. That's very good. Very good point. Any other questions or thoughts? We're welcome. I want to encourage people, if you do have questions, thoughts, please get a hold of us. Should have put my email up there, contact information. You can do that too. But Info Santa Clara will get it to the right people, and we'll respond to you. Any thoughts you have between now and Tuesday, we'll try to share those with the City Council too. We're talking with them on the 6th. So if there's no more questions or so on. Again, feel free to talk to anybody in this room. They're the experts in the field here. So, Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.